Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Danny and I'm going to be doing the reader's profile tag today. I was tagged for this by two great booktubers whose channels I really love, Away with Words and also Anna from Russia with Books. And the tag was originally created by Hillary B. Green. The tag has 10 questions in total, and I think it's a pretty interesting variety. I really had to sit and think through some of these. They weren't questions that I had really considered before now. But to get into it, the first question is, what for you makes a good book? And this is one of the ones I kind of had to think about. Obviously, you know, I think about this to some extent every time I sit down and review a book, but I'm going to really focus in on the for you, the subjective aspect of this question. And for that, I think when I think about the common things that books should have in order to be considered good books, I find that the prose style and the writing mechanics are really particularly important to me. I love the feeling of tripping on a really unexpected or skillful turn of phrase, and it provides a feeling like, oh, this is what I can get from reading that I can't get from watching film or TV or viewing a painting, for example. I think it feels special to me when the art leverages the medium that it's told in, when the story leverages the medium that it's told in, you know. Obviously, there's a bunch of other components that enter the equation of good bookness, and it's really more about a constellation of criteria being met relative to what the book is trying to accomplish. I do, when I rate and review books, try to consider the book in the context of its genre, but that enjoyment of the writing itself at the sentence level, or even if it plays with form at a more macro level, that's something I really appreciate regardless of the content or the audience of any particular book. Question 2 is, what are you currently reading? And I currently have 2 books going. I would say I typically have 1 to 3 books going at one time. That's pretty comfortable for me. I like the satisfaction of finishing a book, so I tend to focus on 1 or 2 at a time, and I'm not the kind of person that has like 10 books in my currently reading pile. Also unusual here, these are both of my current books are rereads. The first book I've been savoring for nearly 3 weeks now is Niccolò Rising by Dorothy Dunnett. This is an absolute masterpiece of historical fiction. I've been going slowly, I've been taking a lot of notes, and I expect to put up a review in the next couple of weeks that has both spoilery and spoiler-free discussion. The other book I'm reading is The Vegetarian by Han Kang, and I'm going to be also reading Human Acts and We Do Not Part from the library, and doing a joint review of all of them. Yeah, I've been enjoying rereading both of those books. The third question is, what's the last book you didn't finish and why? I'll say I don't DNF super often, but the last book I did DNF was Dear Wendy by Zhao. I picked that book up during Pride Month last year because I was looking for fiction with aspec representation, asexuality, and aromantic representation. And this is a book about a pair of aromantic, asexual college students. One of them starts an anonymous relationship advice Instagram account that other students at this college write into for advice. And the other one disagrees with the advice being given and creates a rival account. But I didn't get very far into the book at all because I realized very quickly that it was pretty didactic and surface level, and I very much felt the YA-ness of it, and that's not really what I was looking for. The kid across the hall is crying. Question 4 is, what obscure book do you wish other people would read? I checked to see what I rated 5 stars on Goodreads that had the fewest ratings, and this one actually kind of shocked me. It only had 600 ratings. And so the obscure book I would like to recommend is Tender by Sofia Samatar. This is a short story collection, and I don't read a ton of short story collections, but this one really impressed me with the quality of the short stories and the way the stories were so diverse but so cohesive in their overarching themes. The stories are primarily fantasy and sci-fi, but I would say it's on the soft literary side of those genres. There was a lot of integration of folklore, of cryptids, and environmental stories. Stories sort of in post-apocalyptic settings. One of my favorite stories in the collection was called Walk Dog, and that was written as a high school girl's essay about a folk creature named Walk Dog. And I thought that story was so unique, so charming, and it was also an awfully sad story about high school bullying and social pressure, but told in such an interesting way. Another really great story, almost a novella length from the collection, was Fallow, which describes a society of Anabaptists who left Earth decades ago and set up a small space colony, and it's about how that space colony is operating. The entire collection was very good. There were a couple of them that I bounced off of out of like the 20 in the collection, but I thought that was a great hit rate, and I think reading them as a collection was really satisfying. So I highly recommend Tender if you're looking for some interesting short stories in the fantasy space. What is the longest book you've ever read? The longest book I've read seems to be A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon at 880 pages. Unfortunately, I didn't really think it earned its page count, and I thought it suffered a bit from the problem some multi-POV stories have, where you're way more invested in one or two point of views relative to the other point of view. So like you're like bored or waiting to get back to them while you're reading the point of views you're not as interested in. Question 6 is, if you could have a dinner party with 5 fictional characters, who would they be? This is so tricky as a question, like a genuinely difficult question to answer, because there's remembering characters you like and that would actually be nice to hang out with. And also I'm considering, you know, if it's a dinner party, you have to think about how the guests are going to bounce off of one another. But to start, I think for a dinner party, I would like Chef Nagare from the Kamogawa Food Detectives to be hosting it and cooking for us, if I can stipulate that. I think the Kamogawa Food Detective books are just fine. It's a chef who's a former police detective who now does food detective work in trying to recreate dishes from the client's memories. And in terms of a dinner party, we might have a little bit of a language barrier issue to sort out, but in the age of Google Translate, I think we could make it work. The second guest, I feel like I would invite another former police detective, Steve from We Solve Murders. I think he just seems like a very easygoing, easy to get along with guy, and hopefully he and Chef Nagare would find things to talk about. And third, I don't know why my brain is going to all elderly people, but I think I would want Granny Weatherwax from the Discworld series. I think she's the one character from the Discworld series that I'd most like to have a conversation with. She seems more competent and normal than most Discworld characters. I guess. And then for my fourth and fifth guests, I'm throwing in the gay dads from A Botanical Daughter. I think the curmudgeonly elderly vibes would fit in this dinner party. I don't know actually anymore if I would need to be at the dinner party. I would just like to be a fly on the wall. Question 7 is, what are the 5 books you'd want if stranded on a desert island? This question makes me mad because I want to bring The Lyman Chronicles by Dorothy Dunnett. I'm in the process, as I said, of rereading Niccolò Rising right now. And so I feel confident that I could reread her work over and over and get new things out of them each time. They are so dense with intrigue and historical research, and the language itself is so yummy. But there's 6 books in the Lyman Chronicles, so I would have to go without one. And I guess it'd have to be the first or the second book. But I really love the first book, so I guess I'd cut the second book, Queen's Play, in that case. An alternative would be to pick King Hereafter and other large books that I haven't read yet, just to get the most, reading possible out of the 5 books I bring to this desert island. But I think I'd rather bring something I know I love rather than trying to test out just new books that are large. Question 8 is, what is one book that you could not put down? Most recently, I think this would be The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch. It's a pretty hefty book, but the intrigue and the danger in the second half really had me locked in to learn what happened next. I also want to add that Loch Lamora is very much painted along the same lines as Dorothy Dunnett's Lyman from the Lyman Chronicles, so it's not surprising that I liked that book. Question 9 is 5 books or authors you will never read. This one's hard. I feel like every video I've watched has said similar things because never say never. I think it's rare to actively exclude a book or an author from your reading, but I can probably come up with a list of things I'm unlikely to ever prioritize or get around to. For example, I like fantasy, I can like romance, I tend to like historical romance and queer romance more than contemporary romance, but being a romantic myself, that's not a space I tend to venture into with a lot of frequency. So I'm highly skeptical that the modern popular romantasy books are going to be my thing. I probably won't ever read A Court of Thorns and Roses. I probably won't read that Rebecca Yarros series. That's what I've got for this question. Number 10, if you were to write a book, what would it be about? Theoretically, I like writing. I did more creative writing when I was in high school and college, but I never wrote anything longer than a short story. If I were to write a book, it would probably be historical fiction or fantasy because that's what I like to read, and it would probably be about a linguist. I have a PhD in linguistics, and I feel like anyone who's studied linguistics for any length of time has dabbled into the idea of conlanging. So I might construct a language for a fantasy book, for example. I had an idea once for a fantasy story that was basically a rival, but instead of trying to figure out how to speak with an alien, we're trying to figure out how to speak with a ghost that speaks a dead language. Let me know if someone's already written that idea, but I think there's room to play there. I also think in terms of topics or themes I'd be interested in writing about, there are certain things that I tend to like to read about that I would probably end up writing about. In terms of themes. I think socioeconomic class, grief, sibling relationships, those are all things I really enjoy reading about, and so would probably make their way into any writing I did. And then just to wrap things up, I will tag a couple of people. A lot of the people I might have tagged have already done the tag recently. So I will tag a couple folks whose channels I've been enjoying and who I'd be curious to get to know better through these questions. But obviously don't feel any obligation to do the tag unless it's interesting to you. The first is Charlie from Charlie Read a Book. His channel is great. His videos have really great production quality, and he reads a lot of fantasy, and he also reads more manga and comics than I do. I'd also like to tag Kim at Midnight Scrawls. I've recently discovered her channel and I've been enjoying it for fantasy recommendations, especially for queer fantasy and fantasy written by BIPOC authors. This was interesting to think about. Please let me know your thoughts with some of these questions in the comments, and I will see you next time.